Mark Rogers TV, Florida edition, talking Gators with David Waters from Gators Breakdown, our source for Florida football. And of course, it's a happy note, Dave, to conclude the season. What was supposed to be a close game against Iowa broke open late third quarter in a 30-3 romp over the Hawkeyes. So your initial impressions of a game that we just expected to be very tight and defensive minded, where, yeah, the offense didn't look great for most of the game, but finally started to make some plays.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at, Austin Appleby being able to bounce back from those first two interceptions he threw very early in the game. Good for him in his final game as a Gator to bounce back and get a bowl win for Florida, who, after last year's bowl game got destroyed by Michigan, and much like last year going into this game, losses to FSU and Alabama. So, Florida was able to buck the trend. The way Iowa finished the season, a lot of people were jumping on that train with the way they beat Michigan and Illinois and Nebraska. They were on a roll coming into this game. They were running the ball very well. And I mentioned, going into the game for Florida, this had to be an LSU game mindset. You had to go into this game where nobody was expecting you. You're missing a whole lot of guys on defense. Nobody expecting you to stop this good Iowa run game. And you come in and, yeah, they got 170 yards on the ground, around about. But, Florida didn't let the big play kill them. And really 55 yards passing as well. They were able to harass C.J. Beathard the whole game. And they broke open, the game on a Mark Thompson surprise screen pass. The one player I did not expect to see that from was Mark Thompson, who didn't play a lot this year. Kind of got put in the doghouse late in the season. And lo and behold, he makes his biggest play of the season in the bowl game. So, and then you had freshman Chauncey Gardner, a pick six, and another pick later on. You had young guys on defense making plays. So it was a lot like the LSU game I mentioned, but with a better score. We're able to make some plays in the red zone. One of the best drives of the season in the first drive of the second half, when they were really able to put the game away. So, it was a good all-around game for Florida defense, offense, and a good way to end the season.
Yeah, it's pretty much the football game that I expected for almost three quarters. I think the touchdown that broke it out to 17-3 was late in the third quarter, last few seconds of the third quarter. So as you mentioned, Iowa, Akron Wadley had a nice game statistically, but didn't break anything. So everything was 8 or 10 yards that he did break to the second level. He did have a 27-yard run, but he ran for $115. And so Iowa they looked strong in the running game, but when you rely on obviously 75 and 80-yard drives where you're knocking it out at 4 to 6 yards a crack, you're most likely not going to be able to keep that up. And Iowa, just completely void of any dynamic playmakers on the outside, are able to do that. And C.J. Beathard, boy, by the end of the game, I didn't know if they were going to be able to carry him off the field or what the deal was, because that Florida pass rush just got after him and were beating him to submission.
They were, and part of it you could really say goes to that Florida secondary with Quincy Wilson, Jalen Tabor, and I mentioned Chauncey Gardner. There was really nowhere for him to go with the ball. The receivers were blanketed. He had to make a few plays with his legs as well. Almost scored a touchdown on a great run where he pirouetted almost into the end zone and stopped very short. And as I mentioned, going back to that LSU game where Florida stuffed LSU multiple times on the goal line, they showed up again. It was 4th and 1. Defense stands up and makes a play on 4th and 1, and that probably was the game changer there. Florida, the confidence. Hey, you know what? We've done this before. You know what? We're fixing to do it again. So it was a good test of manhood on that play, and kind of just set the tone for the rest of the game, I think. So, Beathard didn't have a lot of time after that. Florida defense abused him, like you said. He probably should have been pulled. I know the broadcast mentioned it multiple times of how he shouldn't have been in the game. They probably went a little overboard with it, but it was something they kept harping on a good bit. But I went into the game thinking Beathard could not throw in this Florida secondary, and that turned out to be true. If they could have come in and run the ball a bit better, they would have gave Florida some trouble. But once Florida got up by a couple scores, it was pretty much over with after that.
Yeah, Ed Cunningham, from what I remember, not pleased with C.J. Beathard still being in the game, and repeatedly said that. And it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense because as a senior, he's not a top-level quarterback, but he will be looked at in the NFL draft and probably has some level of an NFL future on hand. Anyway, back to the Gators. Yeah, you stole my thunder there because definitely that was the turning point. Beathard almost gets into the end zone. It's a 3-3 game, I believe, at that point.
Yep.
So I was looking to obviously score what's going to be very few touchdowns for anybody in this game. And you get the stop. Wadley just gets smothered on the fourth down. And then I think once the field was flipped and then the Thompson play,
yep.
and Iowa's defense extremely good, but you started to break some tackles. Jordan Scarlett started to make some plays in the run game and started to break some tackles. And there was 2 drives there that really changed the game there in the second quarter and showed that Florida was the better football team. Definitely. Anything else that you saw from this effort that gives you some hope for 2017?
I mentioned it. I mean, VaShawn Joseph, a true freshman linebacker who's taken over for all the injuries at linebacker, come in, and he was a missile. I mean, he was everywhere on the field. He reminded me of Jared Davis, the guy who was in there kind of playing for. He was all over the field. He was a missile. He was laying the wood every time he got a chance. So that hit and those hits over and over again. They're losing Jared Davis. They're losing Alex Anzalone. But these young linebackers, the last half of the season, really showed up in big games. They really played well. So it was just another opportunity to see some of these young guys. It was the young guys that came away impressed with. It was Chauncey Gardner, I mentioned, with his 2 interceptions. VaShawn Joseph being everywhere, making tackles. And then so it was those type of plays, those for seeing the young guys still make some plays in a tough game where they were asked to, not a lot of experience, but you got to go out there and, Jim McElwain says it all the time, but he's not the only coach that says it, man down, man up. So that's exactly what they did. They were in position to make plays. They made the plays. So being able to see the young guys, Kylan Johnson, another linebacker who was in there making some plays. So it was, just very nice to see these young guys making plays. That was one of the biggest takeaways I'll take from this bowl performance.
So despite giving up 54 and losing to Alabama, and I think we'll find out in a few days that Alabama's the best team in the country, and we believe that for the last couple of seasons, and the Florida State effort, but the Seminoles turn around and show us how good they can be against a Michigan team that most believe to be a top 5 team most of the season. 9-4, the win at LSU, and LSU, again, down the stretch, just forget the 4 losses. I think LSU is one of the 10 or 12 best teams in the country, and they showed that against Louisville, had no issues in that game. It's turned out to be a pretty good showing. You take on an Iowa team that's not great, but they're solid, and you dominate the second half of the game. And it's really a solid showing from a team that came in 17th in the country, so should finish top 15 with the 9-4 record.
Yeah, you look at that, and it is something you have to think about. Presbyterian game when they went to play at LSU was canceled, so that should have been win number 10. So Florida should have been 10-4. It would have been Jim McElwain's back-to-back seasons with 10 wins. You mentioned by far the LSU game was the best win of the season. You can definitely, like you said, look away from what LSU's record was. Since Ed Orgeron got hired, they've been on fire. The only team they've lost to are Alabama and Florida. So by far the best win. Yeah, you would have liked to end on a better note with FSU and Alabama. You don't want to get blasted in the SEC championship game and people saying you don't deserve to be there because the East is weak and all that. I mean, look, Florida's done this 2 years in a row with a quarterback that has no really business being a quarterback at Florida. Jim McElwain's making, what he can out of the situation. So 10 wins back-to-back seasons. I know he gets questioned a lot. Yes, the offense should be better. I'll say it too. But, it is what it is at this point. It needs to look better in year 3. But Jim McElwain still needs to get a lot of credit for what he's done in his first 2 years, turning this roster around. The offensive line numbers are much better than what they were coming in. And you and I have talked for the last couple of years and how much of a joke it was going into last year where they couldn't even really hold a spring game. Those numbers are better there. Your top playmakers are freshmen and sophomores: Antonio Callaway, Jordan Scarlett, Michael P. Ryan. The numbers are there. the young guys are there making plays all season long after starters went down with injuries. So, the future to me looks bright as long as Florida, again, has to find a quarterback. The defense, never a problem at Florida. They'll have young guys, but, it's never a problem at Florida. So, yes, it was another 10-win season. I think there's still something to be said for winning the SEC East when you weren't picked to win it. So, that's what Florida can point to. So, of course, you can go back and look at the loss to Tennessee and how you were up 21-3 in that game and saying you shouldn't have lost that game. It should have been an 11-win season, maybe lost to them for the first time in 11 years. But, all in all, it was a good season for Florida.
All right. It's our weekly look at the Florida Gators with David Waters from Gators Breakdown. Please join him on, iTunes and SoundCloud. Correct,
Yep.
David?
Yep, Gators Breakdown on SoundCloud and iTunes.
This guy knows the Gators like nobody else, and obviously his insight into the rest of the SEC and college football as well. All right, David, in future weeks, we're going to look at those NFL draft-ready guys that are leaving as juniors and making those decisions in the next few weeks before January 15th. And, of course, recruiting season is underway, and National Signing Day coming up in about 5 to 6 weeks. All right, David, appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, Mark.